Hello and welcome. Welcome to Input English. Today I have a story for you. It's a true story. It has to do with my dad and one of his old friends, one of his war buddies. So let's get started. During World War II, my dad enlisted in the Army. He and a good friend of his enlisted together, and their plan was to become fighter pilots. They applied for flight training when they enlisted. They went through the screening process, and my dad's good friend was accepted for flight training. My dad was not accepted because they detected a problem with his vision that prevented him from being accepted. Then it was a little strange because his visual problem was not sufficient to keep him out of the Army, and they assigned him to be a photographer. Now, when I heard this as a young kid, it seemed odd that someone with a visual problem would be selected by the Army to be a photographer. But that's the way it happened. During the war, my dad was assigned to duty in the South Pacific as a photographer. I don't really know all the details of where he went. He didn't really leave a detailed description of all his exploits during the war. He did not indicate that he was actually in combat, but did a lot of aerial photography and some ground photography as well. While in the South Pacific, he was assigned to a base, and in this base, he was there long enough that he became friends with the supply sergeant. Sarge was a great guy, and they had a lot of dealings because of the need for supplies for the photographers, so they got to know each other rather well. One day on that base, the Sarge was crossing a road but was unfortunately hit by a Jeep and injured. But his injuries were entirely restricted to his teeth. The Jeep had knocked his teeth out. So he received appropriate care, but after the war, he had ongoing dental problems and wound up with all his upper teeth being removed. He wound up with a denture. After the war, the Sarge and my dad kept in touch, but from a distance. Sarge lived up near Chicago. When we were relatively young kids, we found out that the Sarge and his wife were going to come visit us during the summer. And this was a good thing. This was going to be a lot of fun. They brought their eldest son, who was a very nice young fellow, a bit older than us. And we decided during their visit to go down to the lake and enjoy the lake. This would include water skiing. Now, the Sarge had never been water skiing. So my dad thought, this is perfect. I'll teach him how to water ski. So they went about their business doing just that. My dad gave him detailed instructions on what was going to happen, how he should behave, and he fitted him with a life jacket. He set him up in the shallow water, gave him the ski rope attached to the boat, and they had reviewed the hand signals so that the Sarge would know what was about to happen. When it was time, my dad accelerated the boat, and the line came straight, and then it started pulling him slowly through the water. At that point, my dad increased the throttle somewhat and brought him up to the surface of the water on his skis, but unfortunately he immediately lost control and fell. He lost his balance. No problem. This was the first try. So they brought him back into the shallow water, set everything up, and this was all expected. It would be very unlikely that someone would get up and ski on water skis the first time, having never done it before. This was normal. So this process was repeated a number of times, and each time they went further and progress was being made. After 6 or 8 tries, he was able to stand on these skis, but immediately lost control, fell forward just like before. But this time was different, because when he came up out of the water, he seemed very upset. He was yelling. As my dad came closer to him in the boat, it became obvious what had happened. He had lost his denture. He'd lost his upper plate in the water. Quick thinking, my dad immediately took the anchor from the boat and threw it overboard. Now, this anchor had a long rope attached to it, so it would be easy to find. It wasn't clear how deep the water was there, but it was pretty deep. He brought the Sarge back to the shallow water, and they stopped trying to water ski for a while. My dad put on a mask and flippers and went out to that spot which he had marked with the anchor and dove down trying to find the teeth. The idea was just go down there with a mask and see them and just pick them up and bring them back. Seemed simple, but the water was very deep and visibility was not really very good. So he did not find the teeth. He did find the anchor. He left it there. It still marked the place where the teeth had been lost. Now, this is where my mom had some quick thinking that paid off. She remembered that her cousin, who lived across town, had a neighbor who was a police officer. So my mom called her cousin and got in touch with the police officer, and she asked if he knew any scuba divers who might be able to help us find these dentures. As a matter of fact, he did. So my mom shortly was talking to another police officer who was a scuba diver. She told him the story that my dad's war buddy had lost his dentures while water skiing. We knew basically where they were, but we couldn't retrieve them. Might he be able to help us? He was happy to help us. And it wasn't too long until he had shown up and was brought down to the lake to try to find these teeth. He had simple scuba gear, which he assembled, and he walked into the water. My dad told him how to find the likely site for the anchor and recommended that he start searching at the anchor and then search around that in a pattern trying to find these teeth. We reassured this scuba diver that we had done nothing to disturb the mud and sediment, so hopefully the teeth will be visible. He went into the water, submerged, and disappeared. We could see his bubbles coming up, and we saw that he swam out underwater. His bubbles made the path out to the spot where the accident had occurred. It was probably 15 or 20 minutes later that he came straight up with something in his hand. He held his hand over his head and shook it. He had found the teeth. He brought them ashore, handed them to their owner, and everyone was thrilled. He was profusely thanked. And as he packed up his gear and made his way back to his car, my dad asked if we should pay him for his trouble. It was very kind that he would come out and provide this kind of help. Could we pay him for his trouble? He said, no. He said to my dad, you know, a lot of times when I'm scuba diving for the police department, it's a very sad story. I'm recovering a body. But this, recovering some teeth, this is all good. I'm fine with this. This was payment enough for me. I'm glad to help. Our scuba diving police officer friend drove on home. Everyone was very happy with how this had turned out. Just another shared experience among a couple of war buddies, just like the old times. Well, it was not going to be the last shared experience for that day. No, we continued to enjoy the lake and the water, but the Sarge was done with the water skiing. His son did get to water ski and enjoy that. And later in the afternoon, a rainstorm came up. Now, if you're playing in the water at a lake and it starts to rain, you don't really need to worry that you're going to get wet because you're already wet. However, the raindrops, the big raindrops, when they hit you in the head, they sting a little bit. And so it doesn't take long, if it's a heavy rain, for people, based on common sense, to seek shelter. So that afternoon, when it started to rain, we swam over and got under the dock. And the dock sheltered us, sheltered our heads from the raindrops, which were hitting very hard. Now, our expectation was that this rainstorm would be very short-lived, and then we could resume our activities at the lake. What we had not expected was lightning and thunder. While we were under the dock, holding on and talking, waiting for the rain to stop, lightning struck the lake. How do we know that? Everybody under the dock got a mild jolt. Everybody under the dock got a quick shock. And we were all surprised. No one got hurt, but we quickly got out of the water. This was an electrical storm, and we were in a lake, and the lake just got struck by lightning. No injuries, no problem. We were correct. The storm quickly passed, and we were back in the water after the lightning was done. Just another shared experience between a couple of war buddies. That's the end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I invite comments below, and I hope you join us in future videos. See you soon.